The thunder of hoofbeats echoed across the Texas plains as Katherine Collins rode harder than she ever had before, her golden hair whipping behind her like a flag of defiance. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her hands white-knuckled on the reins as she urged her chestnut mare forward. She didn't dare look back. She knew what she would see. Jasper Blackwood would be there, his dark silhouette against the setting sun, relentless in his pursuit. "You'll never escape me, Katherine," he had promised, his voice as cold as the barrel of the gun he'd pressed to her temple. "You're mine until the day you die." Bandera, Texas, 1875. It wasn't much of a town, but it represented everything she had fled. The daughter of the wealthiest cattle baron in the county, she had been promised to Jasper since she was 16, a business arrangement between her father and the ruthless landowner who had designs on the Collins ranch. 2 years she'd endured his possessive shadow, his tightening grip, the bruises hidden beneath lace sleeves. At 20, she had finally gathered the courage to run. The mare stumbled on loose rocks, nearly sending Katherine tumbling to the ground. She righted herself, heart pounding, and spotted a small creek cutting through the land ahead. She steered toward it, praying the water might hide her tracks. The sun was sinking fast, painting the sky in violent shades of crimson that reminded her too much of the blood she'd seen spilled by Jasper's hand. Her plan had been simple: reach the next town over and catch the eastbound train by dawn. But Jasper had discovered her missing sooner than expected. Now she was veering away from known paths, hoping to lose him in the vastness of the Texan wilderness. As darkness fell, Katherine spotted a flickering light in the distance. A campfire. She hesitated, weighing her options. Bandits and outlaws roamed these parts, but right now, Jasper Blackwood was the devil she was running from. Any other danger seemed preferable. She approached cautiously, slowing her exhausted horse to a walk. The mare's sides heaved beneath her, and Katherine knew the animal couldn't continue much longer. As she drew closer, she made out the silhouette of a solitary figure beside the fire, the brim of a cowboy hat pulled low over his face. "Hello, the camp," she called, her voice carrying across the still night air. "I mean no trouble." The figure stood in one fluid motion, and Katherine's hand moved instinctively to the small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. The man stepped into the light, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, yet young, perhaps 25 or so. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore the practical clothing of a working cowhand, not the fancy attire of the wealthy ranchers she was accustomed to. "Madam," he acknowledged with a tip of his hat, revealing eyes that caught the firelight sharp, assessing but not unkind. "You're a long way from anywhere, especially for a lady riding alone at night." "I'm afraid I'm in some trouble," Katherine admitted, seeing no point in pretense. "I'm being pursued." The cowboy's expression didn't change, but she noticed his hand drift casually toward the holster at his hip. "What kind of trouble might that be? The kind where a man believes he owns a woman?" Katherine met his gaze steadily. "I'm Katherine Collins." "My father was Edward Collins of the Double C Ranch near Bandera." "Heath Lawson," he replied, recognition flickering in his eyes at the mention of her family name. "I've heard of the Double C, fine spread." He studied her for a moment longer. "And who might be chasing you, Miss Collins?" "Jasper Blackwood." The name hung in the air between them. Heath's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I know of Blackwood," he said finally. "Nothing good follows that name." He glanced at her exhausted mare. "Your horse needs rest, and from the looks of it, so do you." "You're welcome to share my fire for the night." Katherine hesitated. "Mr. Lawson, I appreciate your kindness, but I can't stay. Jasper won't stop. He'll track me, and I won't bring his vengeance down on a stranger who showed me charity." Heath's weathered face broke into a small smile that transformed his features. "Miss Collins, I've faced worse than Jasper Blackwood. Besides, your horse won't make another mile tonight." He gestured to where he'd set up camp. "I've got coffee brewing and beans warming. Not fancy fare, but it's hot." The mention of food reminded Katherine that she hadn't eaten since her hasty departure before dawn. Her stomach growled audibly, and a flush of embarrassment warmed her cheeks. Heath pretended not to notice. "Let me take care of your mare. You sit and rest." Too tired to argue further, Katherine dismounted with as much grace as her aching muscles would allow. When her legs buckled beneath her, Heath's steady hand caught her elbow. "Easy there," he said, his voice low and reassuring. His touch was gentle but firm, so unlike Jasper's bruising grip. Katherine pulled away quickly, wary of any man's hands after what she'd endured. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "I can manage." Heath nodded, respecting her space, and turned his attention to her horse. Katherine watched as he removed the saddle and bridle with practiced ease, rubbing down the mare with a spare blanket before securing her near his own gelding. The smell of the coffee drew Katherine to the fire. She sat on a fallen log, accepting the tin cup Heath offered. The hot liquid scalded her throat, but she welcomed the burn, the bitter taste cutting through her exhaustion. "You want to tell me what happened?" Heath asked, settling across from her. Katherine stared into the flames. "My father died 6 months ago, consumption." She took another sip of coffee. "Before he passed, he arranged my marriage to Jasper Blackwood, a merger of lands, essentially. I was part of the deal." "And I take it you objected to being traded like cattle," Heath observed. "I didn't have much choice at first. My father's will left everything to me, but only if I married Jasper. Otherwise, the ranch would be sold off to pay debts I never knew existed." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Jasper made it clear what kind of husband he would be even before the wedding. Small cruelties at first then." She fell silent, the memories too raw. Heath didn't press. He spooned beans onto a tin plate and handed it to her, along with a chunk of cornbread. "After father died, Jasper moved into our home to protect my reputation," she continued after a few bites. "He monitored my every move. The servants, the ranch hands, they all answer to him now. When I finally told him I wouldn't go through with the wedding, Katherine's voice faltered. "He said no woman had ever left him and none ever would, that I'd never escape him." The night seemed to grow darker around them as her words faded into the crackling of the fire. "So you ran," Heath concluded. Katherine nodded. "I took my mother's jewelry, what little cash I could find, and my mare. I was heading for San Antonio to catch the train east. I have a cousin in Boston who might take me in." She looked up at him. "I've been told I'd never escape him so many times that I almost believed it, but I had to try." Heath stared thoughtfully into the darkness beyond their small circle of light. "Blackwood has a reputation. He's made enemies from here to the Oklahoma territory. Men who cross him tend to disappear." He paused. "But he's still just a man." "A man with money and influence," Katherine countered. "The sheriff in Bandera practically works for him." "Then we won't be going to Bandera," Heath said simply. Katherine blinked at him. A lady traveling alone draws attention. A husband and wife passing through raises fewer questions." He caught her startled expression. "Just for appearances, Miss Collins, until we can get you safely away. Why would you help me?" Katherine asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "You don't know me." Heath was quiet for a long moment. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to be trapped." He tossed another stick onto the fire. "Get some rest. We'll head out before dawn." Katherine wanted to question him further, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Heath offered her his bedroll while he took first watch. Despite her wariness, she was asleep almost instantly. the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of night insects fading into darkness. She woke with a start, disoriented in the pale pre-dawn light. Heath was already saddling the horses, moving with quiet efficiency. "There's coffee if you want it," he said when he noticed her stirring, "and we should be moving soon." Katherine sat up, smoothing her rumpled riding dress. She had packed little in her hasty escape, and what she had was hardly suitable for continued travel through rough country. Heath seemed to read her thoughts. "We'll need to find you more practical clothes. Can't have you riding side saddle if we're trying to make good time." The thought of wearing men's clothing would have scandalized her a year ago. Now Katherine merely nodded. "Where are we headed?" "West for now, away from the main trails. I know a place where we can lie low for a few days, figure out our next move." He handed her a battered canteen. "Blackwood will expect you to head east toward civilization." As they rode out, the rising sun at their backs, Katherine found herself studying her unexpected protector. Heath Lawson sat his horse with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle. His face, when not shadowed by his hat, revealed a strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes the color of a summer storm gray with hints of blue. Not conventionally handsome, perhaps, but striking in a rugged way. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow. "Sorry," she said, embarrassed. "I was just wondering what your stake is in all this. Are you running from something too?" Heath's expression revealed nothing. "Everyone's running from something out here. That's why they call it the frontier." They rode in silence for a time, the rhythmic hoofbeats and the occasional call of a hawk the only sounds in the vast emptiness. "I was a Texas Ranger," Heath said suddenly, breaking the quiet, "for 3 years." Katherine waited, sensing there was more to the story. "Last year, my partner and I were investigating cattle rustling near the border, traced it back to a wealthy rancher. When we went to make the arrest, we found ourselves in an ambush instead." His voice remained steady, but Katherine noticed his knuckles whitening on the reins. "My partner didn't make it. I did, barely. Later found out the local judge had been paid off, case dismissed for lack of evidence." "The rancher," Katherine said slowly. "It was Jasper, wasn't it?" Heath nodded grimly. "I couldn't prove it, but he made sure I was finished as a ranger. Turned in my badge rather than serve in a system that let men like him operate above the law." He glanced at her. "So you see, Miss Collins, helping you isn't entirely selfless." Katherine absorbed this information. "You're using me as bait." "No," Heath said firmly. "I'm helping a woman who deserves better than being owned by a monster. If that puts me in Blackwood's path again, so be it." She wanted to believe him. After months of Jasper's manipulations and lies, trusting anyone, especially a man, seemed impossible. Yet something about Heath's straightforward manner rang true. They rode hard through the morning, keeping to less traveled paths. Heath seemed to know the land intimately, navigating without hesitation through creeks and ravines that would hide their trail. By midday, the rolling plains had given way to more rugged terrain, with limestone outcroppings and clusters of live oak and mesquite breaking the landscape. Heath called a brief halt in the shade of a large oak. Katherine practically fell from her saddle, her muscles screaming in protest. She had ridden all her life, but never with such relentless urgency. "We're making good time," Heath said, passing her a strip of dried beef. "There's a small settlement about 4 hours ahead. Friend of mine runs the general store. We can get you proper clothes and supplies there." Katherine nodded gratefully, too tired for conversation. As they rested, she removed her mother's locket from inside her dress, opening it to reveal the miniature portraits within her parents on their wedding day, young and full of hope. Heath noticed the gesture. "Family heirloom." "The only thing of my mother's I managed to take," Katherine confirmed, closing the locket carefully. "She died when I was 12. If she had lived, I don't think Father would have. She trailed off, unwilling to speak ill of the dead. Promised you to a man like Blackwood, Heath finished for her. No, I don't think he would have. Katherine tucked the locket away. My mother was strong-willed. Father always said I inherited her spirit, though lately he'd called it stubbornness, a fault to be corrected. Sounds to me like that spirit is what's keeping you alive, Heath observed, helping her back into the saddle. The settlement of Dry Creek was little more than a dusty cluster of buildings, a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a few scattered houses. Heath led them to a modest structure behind the store where a gray-haired man was splitting wood. "Thomas," Heath called as they approached. The man straightened, shielding his eyes against the afternoon sun. His weathered face broke into a broad smile of recognition. "Heath Lawson. Thought you might be dead by now, boy." The smile faltered slightly when he noticed Katherine. "And who might this be, my wife?" Heath said smoothly. "Katherine, this is Thomas Garrett, finest liar and cheat west of the Mississippi." Thomas barked a laugh. "Says the man who cleaned me out at poker last winter." He extended a hand to Katherine. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Lawson, though I'm surprised this rascal managed to convince any woman to have him." Katherine took his hand, trying to hide her discomfort at the deception. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Garrett. Come inside," Thomas said, gesturing toward the house. "Martha will have my hide if I don't offer you refreshments." Martha Garrett proved to be a plump, cheerful woman who fussed over Katherine immediately, insisting she bathe and change while the men talked. In the privacy of the Garrett's spare room, Katherine scrubbed away days of dust and fear, changing into a simple but clean dress Martha provided. When she emerged, she found Heath and Thomas in serious conversation that stopped abruptly at her appearance. Heath's eyes widened slightly, taking in her transformation from bedraggled runaway to respectable young woman. "You clean up nice, Mrs. Lawson," he corrected himself, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Thomas has been filling me in on local gossip," Heath continued, recovering his composure. "Seems Blackwood's men have been asking questions in towns east of Bandera." "He knows I was heading for San Antonio," Katherine said, sinking into a chair at the table. "Which gives us an advantage," Heath pointed out. "He's looking in the wrong direction." "For now," Thomas cautioned. "Word travels fast out here. You two should move on by morning." Martha served a simple but hearty meal of stew and biscuits. Katherine ate ravenously, realizing how long it had been since she'd had a proper meal. As they ate, Heath and Thomas discussed routes and safe houses. "The old Wilson place might work," Thomas suggested. "It's abandoned since the old man died last winter, but the roof's still good. About a day's ride northwest of here." "That could work for a few days," Heath agreed. "Long enough to plan our next move." Katherine listened to them plot her escape route, a strange mixture of gratitude and unease settling in her stomach. She had exchanged one man making decisions for her with another, albeit one with significantly better intentions. "I should have a say in where we go next," she said suddenly, interrupting their discussion. Both men turned to look at her, Thomas with surprise, Heath with a glint of respect in his eyes. "You're right," Heath acknowledged. "What are you thinking?" Katherine hadn't expected him to yield so readily. I think we should avoid settlements altogether for a while. Jasper has connections everywhere in this part of Texas. The wilderness might be safer." Heath nodded slowly. "Not a bad idea. Thomas, you still have that map of the hill country." While the men pored over maps, Martha took Katherine aside to the small storeroom attached to the house. "If you're heading into rough country, you'll need proper gear," the older woman said practically. She pulled out sturdy trousers, shirts, and a worn leather jacket. These belonged to our son before he moved to California. Should fit you well enough." Katherine fingered the masculine clothing hesitantly. Martha patted her hand. "I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, dear, but I recognize a woman on the run. Sometimes survival matters more than propriety." "Thank you," Katherine said softly, "for not asking questions." "Heath Lawson is a good man," Martha said. "Whatever he's involved in, I trust his judgment and his heart." She gave Katherine a shrewd look. "Though I suspect this marriage of yours is a convenient fiction." Katherine blushed. "It was his idea, for protection." Martha hummed noncommittally. "Well, fiction or not, that man looks at you like you're something precious." She began packing the clothes into a saddlebag. "Not many get a second chance at happiness, dear. Don't let fear keep you from recognizing it when it comes." Katherine wanted to protest that there was nothing between her and Heath beyond their temporary alliance, but the words died on her lips. The truth was more complicated. In just 2 days, this stranger had shown her more respect and consideration than she'd known in years. It was unsettling. They departed Dry Creek before sunrise, Katherine now dressed in trousers and a loose shirt, her hair braided and tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. The disguise was surprisingly comfortable, and Heath had shown her how to ride astride a scandalous position for a lady, but far more practical for their journey. "How do I look?" she asked as they rode out, attempting levity despite the tension of their situation. Heath glanced over, his expression unreadable in the dim pre-dawn light. "Like trouble," he finally said, but there was a warmth in his voice that made her stomach flutter. They rode northwest as planned, following game trails and dry creek beds rather than established roads. Heath proved to be a skilled woodsman, pointing out signs she would have missed: tracks, disturbed vegetation, the behavior of birds and animals that might indicate human presence nearby. By midday, the terrain had changed dramatically. Rolling hills rose before them, covered in juniper and oak. The air was cooler here, the landscape wilder and less touched by human settlement. "Hill country," Heath explained as they paused to water the horses at a small spring. "Not many people venture this far. Those that do tend to mind their own business." Katherine scanned the rugged horizon. "It's beautiful." "And harsh," Heath warned. "Flash floods, mountain lions, rattlesnakes. Nature doesn't forgive mistakes out here." They reached the abandoned Wilson homestead by late afternoon, a small cabin nestled in a protected valley, with a nearby stream and enough grass for the horses. The roof was intact as Thomas had promised, though the interior was dusty and home to various small creatures that scurried away at their entrance. "Not exactly the Collins ranch," Heath commented as he swept cobwebs from a corner, "but it'll do." Katherine set about making the place habitable while Heath tended to the horses and gathered firewood. By nightfall, they had a small fire going in the stone fireplace, the worst of the dust cleared away, and bedrolls spread on opposite sides of the single room. They ate a simple meal of beans and salt pork from their supplies, sitting before the fire in companionable silence. Katherine found herself studying Heath's profile in the firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow, the way the flickering light caught in his dark brown hair. "Tell me about your family," she said suddenly, wanting to know more about this man who had risked so much for her. Heath prodded the fire with a stick. "Not much to tell. Father was a blacksmith in a small town near Austin. Mother taught school. Both gone now. Fever took them 10 years back." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. He shrugged. "It was a hard time. I was 17 on my own. Worked cattle drives for a few years, then joined the Rangers." He glanced at her. "What about you? Any family besides the cousin in Boston?" Katherine shook her head. "None that would help me." Father's family disowned him when he married my mother. She was a schoolteacher without family connections or fortune. When she died, he threw himself into building the ranch. It became his obsession. She stared into the flames. I think he saw the marriage to Jasper as securing his legacy. The Collins name would continue even if I had to bear it alongside Blackwood's. "And what do you want?" Heath asked. "If you make it to Boston, what then?" It was a question Katherine hadn't fully allowed herself to consider, focused as she'd been on escape. "I want freedom. To make my own choices. To marry for love someday, perhaps." She smiled wryly. "Simple things that seem impossible right now." "Not impossible," Heath said quietly, "just worth fighting for." Their eyes met across the fire, and Katherine felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. For the first time since her father's death, hope flickered within her, fragile but persistent. The moment was broken by the distant howl of a wolf. Katherine started, and Heath rose to check that the door was securely barred. "We should get some rest," he said. "Long journey ahead tomorrow." Katherine nodded, settling onto her bedroll. Despite the hard floor and strange surroundings, sleep came quickly, her body exhausted from days of tension and travel. She woke disoriented in the dark, heart racing from a nightmare where Jasper's hands closed around her throat. A soft voice called her name, and she felt a gentle touch on her shoulder. "Katherine, you're safe," Heath murmured. "It was just a dream." She clutched at his arm, still half trapped in the nightmare. "He found me," she gasped. "He always finds me." "Not this time," Heath promised, his voice steady and sure. "I won't let him." In the darkness, with fear still coursing through her veins, Katherine did something she hadn't planned. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. It was brief, impulsive, born of fear and need and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Heath stilled, his breath catching. For one terrible moment, Katherine thought she had ruined everything between them. Then his hand came up to cradle her face with exquisite gentleness, and he returned the kiss, soft and questioning. When they broke apart, Katherine could feel heat flooding her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have." "Don't apologize," Heath said, his voice rough. "Unless you regret it." "I don't," she admitted. "But I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of feeling anything. Of trusting anyone." She drew a shaky breath. "Of starting something I can't finish because we're both running for our lives." Heath's thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. "Then we don't have to start anything. Not until you're ready. Not until you're safe." He moved back to his own bedroll, maintaining the distance she had requested even as her body longed to close it again. It was that respect, that willingness to wait, that touched Katherine more deeply than any passionate declaration could have. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Get some sleep," Heath replied softly. "I'll keep watch." Morning brought clarity and a certain shyness between them. Neither mentioned the kiss as they prepared a cold breakfast and packed their few belongings. Heath studied the crude map Thomas had provided, plotting their route forward. "If we follow this ridge," he said, tracing a line with his finger, "we can reach the Santiago trading post in about 3 days. It's run by a former ranger I trust. From there, we might be able to arrange passage to New Mexico territory." "That far?" Katherine asked, surprised. Heath nodded grimly. "Blackwood's reach is long in Texas. The territories might offer more safety." As they saddled the horses, Heath suddenly went still, his head cocked as if listening. Katherine opened her mouth to ask what was wrong, but he silenced her with a raised hand. "Riders," he said, voice low and tense. "At least 3 coming fast." Katherine's blood ran cold. "Jasper, can't tell, but we need to move. Now." They mounted quickly, abandoning any supplies they couldn't immediately pack. Heath led them up a narrow game trail that wound into the hills, away from the approaching riders. Catherine's heart hammered in her chest as she followed, ducking low branches and urging her mare up the steep path. Behind them, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. "They're gaining," she called to Heath, fear sharpening her voice. He glanced back, his expression tightening. "There's a split in the trail ahead. When I signal, you take the left fork and ride hard. Don't stop, don't look back, I'll catch up." "What are you going to do?" Katherine demanded. "Buy us time." His hand moved to the rifle secured to his saddle. "No," Katherine said firmly. "I won't leave you to face them alone." Heath's eyes flashed with unexpected anger. "This isn't a discussion, Katherine. I can't protect you if I'm worried about where you are." The hurt must have shown on her face because his expression immediately softened. "Please," he said, "trust me." Those two words hung between them, weighted with everything unspoken. Katherine nodded once tightly. They reached the fork and Heath signaled. Katherine urged her mare left without looking back, though everything in her screamed to stay with him. She rode hard, the narrow path forcing her to focus on the treacherous footing rather than her fear for Heath. The sound of gunshots echoed through the hills behind her. Katherine's hands tightened on the reins. One shot, then two more in quick succession. Then silence. She slowed her horse, torn between continuing as instructed and turning back. The mare danced nervously beneath her, sensing her indecision. More shots rang out, 4, 5, then nothing. Katherine made her decision. She turned the horse around. The path back seemed longer, each bend revealing only more empty trail. When she finally reached the fork, she paused, listening intently. No sounds of struggle, no voices, no hoofbeats. Just the wind through the juniper and the call of a hawk circling overhead. "Heath," she called, her voice small in the vast silence. No answer. Fear clutched at her throat as she urged her mare forward, following the right fork. Around a sharp bend, the trail widened into a small clearing. Katherine pulled up short at the sight that greeted her. 3 men lay sprawled on the ground, unmoving. None were Heath. 2 horses stood nearby, reins trailing. The third horse was nowhere to be seen. Katherine dismounted cautiously, approaching the fallen men with her hand on the small derringer in her pocket. All 3 wore the distinctive silver star of Texas Rangers, not Jasper's men. Relief flooded her, quickly followed by confusion and dread. Where was Heath? And why had he shot lawmen? A sound behind her made her whirl, gun raised. Heath emerged from the trees, leading his gelding. Blood streaked his left sleeve and his expression was grim. "I told you to ride on," he said, though there was no real anger in his voice, just weariness. "You're hurt," Katherine replied, holstering her gun and moving toward him. Heath waved her off. "It's nothing. Bullet grazed me." He glanced at the bodies. "We need to go, now." "They're Rangers," Katherine said, not moving. "Why would Rangers be after us?" Heath's jaw tightened. "Not all Rangers are good men. Blackwood has friends in the Corps, men who owe him or fear him. Or maybe they are after you," Katherine suggested quietly. "A former Ranger gone rogue." Their eyes met, mutual distrust flaring briefly before Heath looked away. "Think what you want," he said flatly. "But we need to move before more come." Katherine glanced again at the fallen men. "Did you kill them?" "No," Heath said, sounding offended at the suggestion. "Shot to wound, not kill. They'll live, though they might wish otherwise when they wake up with headaches from hell." He mounted his horse with a barely suppressed wince of pain. Katherine hesitated only a moment before following suit. Whatever Heath's past, whatever complications lay between them, turning back wasn't an option. They rode in tense silence, pushing deeper into the hill country. By nightfall, they had crossed a wide creek and entered a labyrinth of limestone canyons that Heath navigated with practiced ease. They made camp in a sheltered overhang. No fire this night for fear of attracting attention. As they ate a cold supper of jerky and hardtack, Katherine finally broke the silence. "Let me see your arm." Heath started to object, then sighed and extended his injured limb. Katherine gently rolled up the bloodied sleeve, revealing an angry furrow across his bicep where the bullet had grazed him. "It needs cleaning," she said, reaching for their water canteen and the small medical kit Martha had packed for them. Heath submitted to her ministrations without comment, though she knew the alcohol stung fiercely when she poured it over the wound. As she bandaged his arm, her fingers brushed against old scars, evidence of a life marked by violence. "How many men have you killed?" she asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could reconsider it. Heath's muscles tensed beneath her touch. "Only when I had no choice," he answered after a long pause. 5, maybe 6. I don't keep count." Katherine tied off the bandage and sat back. "I'm not judging you, aren't you?" His voice was quiet but challenging. "I'm trying to understand the man I've trusted with my life," she replied evenly. "The man I—" She faltered, unable to find the right words for what Heath had come to mean to her in such a short time. Heath's expression softened. "I've done things I'm not proud of, Katherine, but I've never betrayed my own code, never hurt someone who didn't deserve it." He met her gaze directly. "And I've never lied to you." The weight of his words settled between them, a fragile trust rebuilding. "We should rest," Katherine said finally. "I'll take first watch." Heath shook his head. "With that arm?" "No, I'll watch. You need sleep more than I do." Their compromise was to sit together, backs against the canyon wall, shoulders touching as they kept vigil through the early hours of the night. Somewhere in the darkness, Katherine's hand found Heath's, their fingers intertwining in silent understanding. Dawn broke with mist rising from the canyons, creating an otherworldly landscape of floating clouds beneath a brightening sky. They ate quickly and continued their journey, following Heath's seemingly instinctive sense of direction through the maze of rock formations. By midday, they had emerged onto a high plateau that offered a commanding view of the surrounding country. Heath reined in his horse, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. "No sign of pursuit," he said. "But that doesn't mean they're not out there." Katherine shielded her eyes against the sun, taking in the vast expanse of Texas spread before them. From this vantage, their troubles seemed smaller somehow, less insurmountable. "What if we didn't run?" she said suddenly. Heath turned to her, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Jasper has power because of his connections, his money, and because everyone is too afraid to stand against him," Katherine explained, the idea forming as she spoke. "But what if we found evidence of his crimes, something that even his friends in the Rangers couldn't ignore?" "That's a dangerous game," Heath warned. "Men like Blackwood don't leave evidence lying around." "No, but they do leave witnesses," Katherine persisted. "You said yourself he's made enemies, people who might talk if they knew someone was finally taking a stand." Heath studied her with a mixture of concern and growing respect. "You're suggesting we build a case against one of the most powerful men in Texas, rather than running from him." "I'm suggesting I stop being the frightened woman he thinks I am," Katherine replied, a new strength in her voice. "That we stop running and start fighting back." A slow smile spread across Heath's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his features, lighting his gray eyes and revealing a hint of dimples in his weathered cheeks. "Katherine Collins," he said, "you might be the bravest person I've ever met." The warmth of his approval flooded through her, more intoxicating than any compliment she'd received in drawing rooms and social gatherings. This was real, earned through shared danger and mutual respect. "It won't be easy," Heath cautioned, growing serious again. "And it will be dangerous, more dangerous than running." "I know," Katherine acknowledged, but I'm tired of letting fear dictate my life. If I keep running, I'll never truly be free of him." Heath nodded slowly. "Then we'll need allies. People who can't be bought or intimidated." He thought for a moment. "I know a federal marshal in Austin who's been trying to build a case against cattle rustlers crossing into Mexico. If Blackwood's involved as I suspect, the marshal might be interested in what we know." "Austin," Katherine repeated. "That's taking the fight straight to Jasper's doorstep." "Sometimes the safest place is the one your enemy least expects," Heath said. "But first, we continue to Santiago Trading Post. We'll need supplies and information before we make our next move." They continued their journey with renewed purpose, the dynamic between them shifting subtly. No longer was Heath simply protecting Katherine, they were now partners in a dangerous endeavor, each bringing different strengths to their alliance. The Santiago Trading Post appeared on the horizon late the following day, a cluster of adobe buildings nestled in a small valley where several trails converged. It was larger than Katherine had expected, almost a proper settlement rather than a simple outpost. "Miguel Santiago started with just one building 20 years ago," Heath explained as they approached. "Built it into a stopping point for traders, trappers, and anyone else passing through. His wife, Elena, runs the best kitchen in 100 miles." They were greeted at the edge of the settlement by a young man on horseback, rifle casually but visibly ready across his saddle. "State your business," he called as they drew near. "Tell Miguel that Heath Lawson is calling," Heath replied. "And that I'm hungry enough to eat one of his prize bulls raw if Elena doesn't have something cooking." The young man's serious expression cracked into a grin. "Lawson, thought you might be dead by now." It was the second time Katherine had heard that greeting, and she wondered just what kind of life Heath had led that his continued existence surprised people. The sentry escorted them to the main building, where a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard emerged to greet them. "Heath, you son of a gun!" Miguel embraced Heath warmly, then stepped back to eye Katherine with undisguised curiosity. "And who is this lovely señorita?" "My wife, Katherine," Heath said, maintaining their cover story. "Katherine, this is Miguel Santiago, former Texas Ranger and the most honest scoundrel you'll ever meet." Miguel laughed heartily at the introduction. "Any wife of Heath's is family here. Come inside, both of you. Elena will have my hide if I keep you standing in the dust." The interior of the Santiago home was surprisingly comfortable, with colorful woven rugs, solid wooden furniture, and walls adorned with an eclectic mix of Mexican artwork and practical tools of frontier life. Elena Santiago, a handsome woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner, welcomed them with the same warmth as her husband. Once they were settled with plates of rich beef stew and fresh cornbread, Miguel leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Now, Heath, what kind of trouble are you in this time? Because a man doesn't show up at my door with a beautiful new wife and a healing bullet wound unless something's chasing him." Heath glanced at Katherine, who gave him a small nod. They had agreed on the way that Miguel could be trusted with the truth. "Jasper Blackwood," Heath said simply. Miguel's face darkened at the name. "What's that devil got to do with you?" Heath briefly explained their situation, with Katherine filling in details about her father's arrangement with Jasper and her subsequent flight. Miguel and Elena listened without interruption, their expressions growing grimmer as the story unfolded. When they finished, Miguel let out a low whistle. "You two aren't thinking small, are you? Taking on Blackwood is like picking a fight with a mountain lion using nothing but a stick." "We're not looking for a frontal assault," Heath clarified. "We need evidence enough to take to a federal marshal, someone beyond Blackwood's influence." Miguel nodded thoughtfully. You're thinking of Benjamin Walsh in Austin. He's still there then, Heath asked. Still there, still honest, still making powerful men nervous. Miguel smiled grimly. But getting evidence against Blackwood won't be easy. The man's careful. I know things, Katherine said quietly. Things I overheard at the ranch. Names, dates, transactions that didn't seem important at the time, but that might help build a case. Alina, who had been silent until now, placed a hand over Katherine's. You understand what you're risking, yes. If you fail, this man will not show mercy. Katherine met the older woman's concerned gaze steadily. I know, but I can't live looking over my shoulder forever, and I can't let him continue hurting others. Alina studied her for a moment, then nodded with approval. You have courage, Chica. And brains too, I think. She has both in abundance, Heath confirmed, his voice warm with an admiration that made Katherine's cheeks color. Then you'll need more than courage and brains for what comes next, Miguel said, rising from the table. You'll need help, supplies, and information. He turned to his wife. Alina, prepare the guest room. Our friends will stay the night. Just one night, Heath cautioned. We can't risk bringing trouble to your door. Miguel waved away his concern. My door has seen trouble before. Besides, you need rest, and I need time to gather what might help you. That evening, after a bath and a change into clean clothes provided by Alina, Katherine found herself sitting on the trading post's wide porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. The day's revelations and decisions swirled in her mind, excitement mingled with fear, determination shadowed by doubt. Heath joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and settled beside her on the bench, their shoulders nearly touching. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly. Katherine considered the question honestly. Not about fighting back, but I worry about involving others, you, Miguel and Alina, this Marshal Walsh. Jasper doesn't forgive those who cross him. That's their choice to make, Heath pointed out. Just as it was mine when I decided to help you that first night. Why did you? Katherine asked, turning to study his profile. Really? It wasn't just about getting back at Jasper for what happened with the Rangers, was it? Heath took a sip of his coffee before answering. When I saw you riding toward my camp, exhausted and terrified but still fighting, something shifted. He chose his words carefully. I've spent the last year drifting, carrying anger like it was the only thing keeping me alive. But helping you felt right in a way nothing has since I turned in my badge. He met her gaze directly. I didn't plan on caring about you, Katherine. That part happened on its own. The simple honesty of his admission took her breath away. In Jasper's world, words were weapons, promises were traps, and emotions were weaknesses to be exploited. Heath's straightforward declaration was as foreign to that world as a clear stream to a poisoned well. I care about you too, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. More than I should, given how little time we've known each other. Heath's hand found hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. Time measures differently out here. Days can feel like years when you're fighting to survive. They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky, the stars emerging one by one in the vast Texas heavens. Katherine felt a peace she hadn't known in months, despite the dangers that still surrounded them. Whatever happens in Austin, Heath said finally, know that I don't regret a single moment since you rode into my camp. Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, allowing herself this moment of connection. Neither do I. Morning brought renewed purpose and a flurry of preparation. Miguel had been busy overnight, sending riders to contacts throughout the region. By breakfast, information was already trickling back. Blackwood's men have been spotted in San Antonio and New Braunfels. Miguel reported as they gathered around a map spread on the kitchen table. He's cast a wide net, but it seems he's still looking eastward. Good, Heath said. That gives us time to reach Austin if we take the western route. Miguel traced a path on the map with his finger. This trail follows the Pedernales River for a stretch, then cuts through hill country to Austin. It's rough going in places, but less traveled. You'll want to avoid the main roads at all costs. Elena entered with a bundle of clothing for Katherine, practical riding clothes similar to what Martha had provided, but better fitted and of sturdier material. I've packed food, medical supplies, and ammunition, she said, placing the clothes on a chair. And this. She handed Katherine a small revolver, newer and more reliable than her Derringer. A woman should always have protection of her own. Katherine accepted the weapon gratefully. Thank you for everything. Miguel and I know what it is to fight against powerful men, Elena said simply. 20 years ago, when we started this place, the local landowner tried to drive us out, said a Mexican had no right to own such a prime location. Her dark eyes flashed with old anger. We stood our ground then. You must do the same now. They departed Santiago trading post mid-morning, their horses rested and their saddlebags full. Miguel provided them with fresh mounts, stronger animals better suited for the difficult terrain ahead. Their parting words were brief but heartfelt, with promises to return when their business was concluded. The journey to Austin would take 4 days if all went well. They rode at a steady pace, Heath constantly vigilant for signs of pursuit or danger. The landscape changed as they traveled, the rugged hills gradually giving way to more gentle, rolling terrain. On their second night on the trail, camped in a sheltered grove near the Pedernales River, Heath began teaching Katherine more about defending herself. The lessons had started casually with shooting practice during rest stops, but now expanded to include hand-to-hand techniques. If someone grabs you from behind, Heath demonstrated, his arms encircling her waist loosely, drop your weight and drive your elbow back hard, right here. He guided her arm to the vulnerable spot. Katherine followed his instructions, practicing the movement without full force. The physical proximity sent her pulse racing in a way that had nothing to do with self-defense. Good, Heath approved. Again, but harder this time. Don't worry about hurting me. Katherine executed the move with more conviction, breaking his hold and spinning to face him in one fluid motion that surprised them both. Heath grinned. You're a natural. I had motivation to learn, Katherine replied, slightly breathless. Though I hope I never have to use any of this. So do I, Heath agreed, his expression sobering. But if the worst happens and we're separated in Austin, I want to know you can protect yourself. The reminder of the dangers ahead cast a shadow over their moment of levity. They continued practicing until twilight faded into darkness, then settled beside their small campfire. The night was cool, with a light breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and river water. Tell me about your life before all this, Heath said as they finished their simple meal. Not the troubles, the good parts. What made you happy? The question caught Katherine off guard. For so long, her world had been defined by constraints and fears that she had almost forgotten there had been joy too. Horses, she said finally, a smile touching her lips at the memory. I loved riding across the ranch at dawn when the world was still and fresh. And books, my mother left a small library, novels and poetry that father considered frivolous but tolerated because they had been hers. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, remembering. There was a creek on our property with a swimming hole shaded by cypress trees. In summer, I would sneak away and spend hours there, reading or just listening to the birds and the water. Sounds peaceful, Heath commented. It was. Until father got sick. Katherine's smile faded. After that, everything changed. The ranch began to struggle, and Jasper appeared with offers of help that always came with strings attached. She shook her head, not wanting to dwell on those dark memories. "What about you? What made you happy before the Rangers?" Heath poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "I had a good childhood, despite losing my parents young. My uncle took me and taught me ranching, hunting, how to read the land. He wasn't an educated man, but he was wise in the ways that mattered out here." His voice softened with memory. "There was a canyon near his place where the acoustics were perfect. I'd take my harmonica there sometimes, play for hours just to hear the notes echo off the rocks." "You play?" Katherine asked, intrigued by this unexpected glimpse of a gentler side to him. Heath shrugged. "Not well, but it passes the time on lonely trails." "Do you have it with you now?" "The harmonica." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, battered harmonica. "Don't expect much," he warned. "Play something," Katherine encouraged. "Something happy." After another moment's hesitation, Heath raised the instrument to his lips and began to play. The melody was simple but beautiful, a folk tune that spoke of wide open spaces and the freedom of the frontier. The notes hung in the night air, mingling with the sounds of the river and the distant call of a nighthawk. Katherine closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. For these few moments, there was no Jasper Blackwood, no danger waiting in Austin, no uncertain future, just the melody and the man creating it. When the last note faded, she opened her eyes to find Heath watching her, an unguarded tenderness in his expression that made her breath catch. "That was lovely," she said softly. "My mother taught me that song," he replied, tucking the harmonica away. "Said it would remind me of home whenever I felt lost." "Does it?" "It used to." His eyes held hers across the fire. "Now home feels like something I haven't found yet, or someone." The weight of his words settled between them, full of possibility and unspoken questions. Katherine felt herself drawn toward him, the distance between them suddenly unbearable. She moved around the fire to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Heath remained still, watching her with careful restraint, allowing her to set the pace of whatever was happening between them. "I've been told all my life what to want, who to be," Katherine said quietly. "What was proper for a woman of my station. Jasper was just the last in a long line of people deciding my future for me." She took a deep breath. "But this what I feel when I'm with you, this is mine, my choice." Heath reached up slowly, his fingers brushing her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "And what are you choosing, Katherine Collins?" In answer, she leaned forward and kissed him. Unlike their first kiss, born of fear and impulse, this one was deliberate, a declaration of intent. Heath responded with equal purpose, his hand sliding into her hair as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the world seemed altered, sharper, more vibrant, as if Katherine was truly seeing it for the first time. "If we survive this," Heath murmured, his forehead resting against hers, "if we bring Blackwood to justice, what then?" "What do you want your life to be?" "Free," Katherine answered without hesitation. "And with you in it if you'll stay." Heath's smile was slow and genuine, transforming his face. "I'm not going anywhere, Katherine Collins, not as long as you want me beside you." The promise hung in the air between them, fragile and precious. Tomorrow would bring them closer to danger, to Austin and the confrontation with Jasper's influence. But tonight, beneath the vast canopy of Texas stars, they had found something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. The morning was clear and cool as they broke camp, a new awareness between them that manifested in casual touches, shared glances, and a deeper sense of purpose. Their journey continued through increasingly settled country, forcing them to be more cautious, avoiding farmsteads and small communities when possible. By the third day, the outskirts of Austin were visible on the horizon, a growing city nestled along the Colorado River, with the newly constructed pink granite Capitol building rising prominently above the surrounding structures. "It's bigger than I expected," Katherine commented as they paused on a ridgeline overlooking the city. "Texas has grand ambitions," Heath replied. "Austin most of all." His expression grew serious. "From here on, we need to be extremely careful." Blackwood has connections throughout the city, businesses, saloons, even city officials in his pocket. They circled wide around the city proper, approaching from the west where development was sparser. Heath led them to a modest boarding house on the outskirts, the kind of establishment that asked few questions as long as the rent was paid in advance. "Wait here," Heath instructed, dismounting in the alley behind the building. "I'll secure rooms and make sure it's safe." Katherine nodded, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings as Heath disappeared inside. The neighborhood was working class but respectable, with small businesses and residences mingling along the dusty street. Normal life continued all around her, women hanging laundry, children playing, men going about their work, all unaware of the high-stakes drama unfolding in their midst. Heath returned shortly, looking satisfied. "The owner is an old friend of Miguel's. We have 2 connecting rooms at the back of the house, with a view of both the street and the alley. No one will bother us here." Their accommodations were simple but clean, narrow beds with worn but fresh linens, washstands with chipped pitchers, and windows that opened to catch the breeze. After days on the trail, even these modest comforts seemed luxurious to Katherine. "I need to find Marshal Walsh," Heath said once they had settled in. "He keeps an office near the courthouse." "I'm coming with you," Katherine stated firmly. Heath shook his head. "Too risky. If Blackwood has men in Austin, then they're looking for a woman traveling with a man, not a young man on his own," Katherine countered, gesturing to her masculine attire. With her hair tucked under a hat and in the right clothing, she could pass for a slender youth at a distance. Heath studied her for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Stay close and let me do the talking." They set out on foot, Heath leading them through back streets and alleyways rather than the main thoroughfares. Austin in 1875 was a city in transition, part frontier town, part ambitious capital. Horse-drawn carriages shared the streets with pedestrians, while new construction rose alongside established businesses. The federal courthouse was an imposing limestone building near the center of the city. Heath paused in a small park across the street, scanning the area carefully before approaching. "The marshal's office is around the side," he murmured to Katherine. "Follow my lead and keep your head down." They crossed the street casually, just another cowhand and his young assistant on legitimate business. No one gave them a second glance as they entered the building and located the door marked U.S. Marshal. Inside, a clerk looked up from a stack of paperwork. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "Need to see Marshal Walsh," Heath said. "Tell him Heath Lawson has information about cattle rustling along the border." The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly at the name, but he nodded and disappeared through an inner door. Moments later, a tall man with iron gray hair and piercing blue eyes emerged. Marshal Benjamin Walsh had the weather-beaten look of a man who'd spent most of his life outdoors and the alert posture of someone who never truly relaxed. "Lawson," he said, his voice neutral. "Heard you'd left the Rangers." "Not by choice," Heath replied evenly. "Can we speak privately, Marshal?" "What we have to discuss isn't for public consumption." Walsh studied them both for a long moment, his gaze lingering on Katherine with obvious curiosity. Finally, he nodded. "My office. Now." Once the door closed behind them, Katherine removed her hat, allowing her hair to fall around her shoulders. Walsh's eyes widened in surprise. "Well now," he said dryly, "this is unexpected." "Marshal Walsh, this is Katherine Collins," Heath introduced her. "Daughter of Edward Collins of the Double C Ranch." Recognition flashed in Walsh's eyes. Collins, heard he passed, also heard his daughter was engaged to Jasper Blackwood. "Against my will," Katherine clarified, "and that's part of why we're here." For the next hour, they laid out their case: Katherine's forced engagement, Jasper's crimes that she had witnessed or overheard, Heath's history with Blackwood and the corruption within the Rangers, and their belief that federal charges might succeed where local justice had failed. Walsh listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, expression thoughtful. "What you're describing crosses multiple jurisdictions," he said finally. "Cattle theft across state lines, possible international smuggling if Mexico is involved, corruption of law enforcement. It's enough to interest the federal courts if we can prove it." "We can prove it," Katherine asserted. "I know names, dates, transactions. And there are others who would testify if they believed Blackwood could actually be brought to justice." "Maybe," Walsh conceded. "But you're asking me to go up against one of the most powerful men in Texas based largely on hearsay and circumstantial evidence." "We're asking you to investigate," Heath corrected. "To use your authority to gather the proof that local authorities have been too intimidated or corrupted to pursue." Walsh studied them both carefully. "This isn't just about justice for you two, is it? This is personal." "Yes," Katherine admitted without hesitation. "But that doesn't make the crimes any less real or the need for justice any less urgent." The marshal was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded once, decision made. "I'll need detailed statements from both of you. Names, dates, locations, everything you can remember, and I'll need time to verify what I can before making any moves against Blackwood." He fixed them with a stern gaze. "In the meantime, you stay low. Blackwood has eyes everywhere in this city." Relief washed through Katherine. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start, the first real hope that Jasper might face consequences for his actions. "Thank you, Marshal," she said sincerely. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Collins," Walsh cautioned. "This road will get rougher before it smooths out. Blackwood won't go down without a fight." They spent the remainder of the day providing detailed statements, Katherine recalling every suspicious conversation and transaction she had overheard during her time at the ranch. Heath adding his knowledge of Blackwood's operations from his Ranger investigations. It was nearly dusk when they finally left the courthouse, taking a circuitous route back to their boarding house to ensure they weren't followed. "What happens now?" Katherine asked as they reached the safety of their rooms. "We wait," Heath replied, checking that the curtains were drawn before lighting a lamp. "Walsh will need time to corroborate what we've told him, perhaps reach out to other witnesses. And if Jasper discovers we're in Austin before Walsh is ready to move against him," Heath's expression hardened, "then we'll deal with that when it comes. But for now, we've done all we can." The waiting proved more difficult than Katherine had anticipated. Days stretched into a week as they remained largely confined to their rooms, venturing out only when necessary and always in disguise. Heath made occasional forays to meet with Walsh, returning with updates on the investigation's progress. "Walsh has confirmed the cattle smuggling operation," he reported after one such meeting. "Found 3 ranchers willing to testify that Blackwood forced them to sell their herds at ruinous prices, then moved the cattle across the border without proper documentation." "Is it enough?" Katherine asked hopefully. "Not yet, but it's building." Heath removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. The problem is Blackwood's network. Every time Walsh gets close to something significant, information leaks and evidence disappears. Katherine paced the small room, feeling like a caged animal. We can't wait forever. Sooner or later, Jasper will learn we're here. Her words proved prophetic. The very next day, Heath returned from a meeting with Walsh, his expression grim. Blackwood's in Austin, he announced without preamble. Arrived yesterday with a dozen men. He's claiming he's here on legitimate business, but Walsh's informants say he's offering rewards for information about a missing woman. Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. He knows I'm here, he suspects, which is almost as bad. Heath began gathering their few possessions. We need to move. This location isn't secure anymore. Where will we go? If Jasper has men searching the city, not the city, Heath interrupted. Walsh has arranged a safe house outside of town. One of his deputies will escort us tonight. They spent the afternoon in tense preparation, speaking little as they packed their meager belongings and waited for darkness to fall. Katherine found herself touching the small revolver Elena had given her, drawing comfort from its solid presence. At nightfall, a soft knock at their door signaled the arrival of their escort. Deputy Marshal Samuel Cooper was a young man with a serious demeanor and watchful eyes. He led them through back alleys to where 3 horses waited. The safe house is about 10 miles east, Cooper explained in a low voice. Marshal Walsh will meet us there tomorrow with further instructions. They rode out of Austin under cover of darkness, keeping to less traveled roads. The night was clear but moonless, forcing them to move slower than Katherine would have liked. Every shadow seemed to hold potential danger, every distant sound causing her to tense in anticipation of pursuit. The safe house proved to be a small, abandoned farmstead nestled among a grove of oak trees. Cooper led them inside, where oil lamps revealed sparse but functional furnishings. It's not much, he apologized, but it's defensible and off the main trails. I'll take first watch. He moved to position himself near a window with a clear view of the approach. Katherine sat heavily on a rough wooden chair, the events of the past weeks suddenly catching up with her. Heath knelt beside her, his hand covering hers. We're close, Katherine, he said softly. Walsh is preparing warrants. Once they are issued, Blackwood won't be able to hide behind his connections. She nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. And then we'll be free, truly free. To go wherever you want, Heath confirmed. Boston, if that's still your plan. Katherine shook her head, managing a tired smile. My plans have changed. Seems I've developed a preference for Texas after all, or at least for certain company found there. Heath's eyes warmed at her words, but before he could respond, Deputy Cooper suddenly stiffened by the window. Riders, he hissed. At least 6 coming fast. Heath was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. How did they find us so quickly? He muttered, then turned to Katherine. Get your gun. This is about to get ugly. Katherine's hands trembled as she checked that her revolver was loaded. Could it be Marshal Walsh? Walsh wouldn't approach like this in force and at night, Cooper answered grimly, drawing his own weapon. Mr. Lawson, there's a root cellar under the kitchen. Get Miss Collins down there while we hold them off. Heath shook his head. We stand together. Katherine's not helpless. The approaching riders were close enough now that they could hear hoofbeats and men's voices calling directions. Cooper moved to extinguish the lamps, plunging the house into darkness. They haven't surrounded us yet, he observed. Might be able to slip out the back if we move now. Before they could decide, a voice called out from the darkness, a voice that sent ice through Katherine's veins. Katherine, I know you're in there. Come out now and no one needs to get hurt. Jasper Blackwood had found them. Katherine moved to Heath's side, her revolver held steady despite her fear. "I'm not going back to him," she whispered fiercely. "Not alive." Heath's jaw clenched, his eyes never leaving the shapes moving in the darkness outside. "That won't be necessary." To Cooper, he added, "How many bullets can you spare?" The deputy handed over his spare ammunition without question. "What's your plan?" "Create a diversion out front. You get Katherine out the back way, head for the creek we crossed about a mile back. Follow it to where it joins the Colorado. Walsh has a boat cached there he showed me on the map." "And you?" Katherine demanded. Heath met her gaze briefly. "I'll be right behind you." She knew he was lying. "No, I'm not leaving you to face him alone." "This isn't a discussion, Katherine," Heath said, his voice hardening. "You're what matters. The evidence, the testimony, none of it works without you alive to present it." Outside, Jasper's voice called again, impatience evident. "Katherine, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your father wanted us together. You know it's the right thing to do." "I'm giving you until the count of 10, Jasper continued when no response came. "Then my men will come in and get you, and your friend Lawson won't survive the night." Heath's expression darkened at the confirmation that Jasper knew exactly who was with Katherine. "Someone talked," he muttered. "One of Walsh's people must be on Blackwood's payroll." 1. Jasper began counting. "Go," Heath urged, pushing Katherine toward the back of the house where Cooper waited. "Now, 2. Katherine stood her ground. "Not without you 3. "Damn it, Katherine," Heath growled. "This isn't the time for 4. His words were cut off by the sound of approaching riders from the rear of the house. Cooper moved to the back window, swearing softly. "We're surrounded." 5. Katherine's mind raced, searching for options, for any way out of the trap closing around them. 6. "The root cellar," she said suddenly. "You said there's a cellar under the kitchen." 7. Cooper nodded. "It won't hide us for long, but 8. "Not for hiding," Katherine interrupted, "for escaping. Old farmsteads often had escape tunnels in case of Indian attacks." 9. Heath's eyes widened with understanding. "Worth a try. Cooper, cover us." 10. "Time's up, Katherine." As gunfire erupted outside, the 3 of them raced to the kitchen. Heath found the trapdoor hidden under a worn rug, lifting it to reveal a dark hole and a ladder leading down. "Hurry," he urged as bullets splintered the window frames. Katherine descended first, followed by Heath, with Cooper providing covering fire before joining them. The cellar was small and musty, illuminated only by the dim light filtering through the open trapdoor. "Look for any sign of a tunnel," Heath directed, striking a match to provide momentary light. They searched frantically as the sounds of Jasper's men entering the house echoed above them. Katherine ran her hands along the earthen walls, feeling for any opening or different texture. "Here," Cooper called softly from the far corner. "There's a wooden panel." Heath joined him, and together they pushed against the panel, which groaned but gave way, revealing a narrow tunnel reinforced with timber supports. "Ladies first," Heath said, helping Katherine into the opening. The tunnel was low and tight, forcing them to move in a hunched crouch. Katherine led the way, one hand extended before her in the absolute darkness, the other holding her revolver. Behind her, Heath and Cooper followed, occasionally pausing to listen for sounds of pursuit. After what seemed an eternity of crawling through the suffocating blackness, Katherine felt a change in the air, fresher, cooler. The tunnel began to slope upward, and finally her outstretched hand met empty air rather than packed earth. She emerged into the night air, finding herself in a shallow ravine about 100 yards from the farmhouse. Heath and Cooper followed close behind, all 3 lying flat as they assessed their situation. The farmhouse was now fully illuminated, lanterns and torches held by Jasper's men as they searched the property. Angry shouts indicated they had discovered the open trapdoor. "They'll find the tunnel soon," Cooper whispered. "We need to move." They kept low, using the ravine for cover as they made their way toward the creek Heath had mentioned. The sound of water guided them in the darkness, along with occasional glimpses of stars through the trees overhead. Behind them, a shout went up from the direction of the farmhouse. Their escape had been discovered. "Run," Heath urged, no longer concerned with stealth. "Don't stop for anything." They crashed through underbrush, splashed across shallow streams, and scrambled up steep banks driven by the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer. Catherine's lungs burned, her legs ached, but fear and determination kept her moving forward. The creek appeared before them, suddenly a silver ribbon in the darkness. Cooper took the lead now, following the watercourse downstream as Heath had directed. Katherine could hear hoofbeats paralleling their route, Jasper's men spreading out to cut off their escape. "There!" Cooper pointed ahead where the creek widened, joining a larger body of water, the Colorado River. They scrambled down the bank to where a small rowboat was hidden among reeds. Cooper and Heath pushed it into the water as Katherine climbed aboard. Then both men jumped in, grabbing the oars and pulling away from shore just as riders appeared on the bank behind them. Gunfire erupted, bullets spraying water around their small craft. Cooper suddenly grunted in pain, slumping forward. "Cooper!" Katherine moved to his side as Heath continued rowing, driving them toward the center of the river where the current would help carry them downstream. The deputy marshal was clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. "Keep going," he gasped. "Don't stop." More shots came from the shore, but they were moving beyond effective range now, the darkness and the river's width providing some protection. "Which way?" Heath asked, still pulling strongly on the oars. "Downstream," Cooper managed through gritted teeth. "Marshal Walsh has men stationed at Johnson's Crossing, about 3 miles down." Katherine tore strips from her shirt to bind Cooper's wound, a clean shot through his side that had missed vital organs but was bleeding heavily. "Hold on," she encouraged him. "We'll get help soon." The night seemed to stretch endlessly as they drifted with the current, Heath occasionally using the oars to keep them in the main channel and away from the shores where Jasper's men might be waiting. Cooper drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing labored but steady. Finally, lights appeared ahead, the lanterns of Johnson's Crossing, a small ferry point where the river narrowed. Heath guided their boat toward a dock where several armed men stood waiting. "Federal marshals," one called as they approached. "Identify yourselves." "Deputy Cooper is wounded," Heath called back. "We need assistance immediately." The next hours passed in a blur for Katherine. Cooper was taken for medical attention while she and Heath were escorted to a small cabin under heavy guard. Marshal Walsh arrived just before dawn, his expression grim but determined. "Blackwood's gone too far this time," he said without preamble. "Attacking a federal officer, attempting to kidnap a witness. I've got the warrants ready. My men are moving on his properties as we speak." "He won't be taken easily," Heath warned. "No," Walsh agreed, "but he's made a critical mistake. Before tonight, this was about cattle rustling and corruption, serious charges, but complex ones that might get tangled in legal proceedings for years. Now he's committed clear federal crimes with multiple witnesses." Katherine listened to this exchange with growing hope, though exhaustion weighed heavily on her. "What happens now?" "You'll be taken to Austin under heavy guard," Walsh explained. "I need your formal testimony recorded before a judge immediately. Then we move on Blackwood with everything we have." Dawn was breaking as they returned to Austin, the city coming alive with the day's activities, unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst. Katherine gave her testimony as requested, a court clerk recording every word as she detailed Jasper's crimes and abuses. Heath did the same, his account corroborating hers and adding the perspective of his Ranger investigation. By midday, reports began arriving of Blackwood properties being seized, his associates arrested, his operations dismantled by federal authorities acting with unprecedented coordination. But of Jasper himself, there was no sign. "He's gone to ground," Walsh informed them grimly. "But we'll find him. A man like that can't disappear completely." Katherine and Heath were installed in a hotel near the federal building, with marshals posted outside their door and at all entrances. After the chaos and fear of the previous night, the quiet room seemed unnaturally peaceful. "It's almost over," Heath said softly as they sat together, watching the city through their window. "Once they catch Jasper, you'll truly be free." Katherine leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I already feel freer than I have in years. Whatever happens next, no one will ever own me again." Heath's arm tightened around her shoulders. No one should ever have tried. 3 days passed with no word of Jasper's whereabouts, though his empire continued to crumble as more evidence was uncovered and more witnesses came forward, emboldened by the federal action. Katherine began to hope that perhaps he had fled the state entirely, that he had finally accepted defeat. On the 4th day, Heath was summoned to Marshal Walsh's office to provide additional details about Ranger corruption connected to Blackwood. Katherine remained in their hotel room, guarded by a young deputy named Williams who seemed more interested in the newspaper he was reading than in his protective duties. When a knock came at the door, Williams rose lazily to answer it. "Probably just lunch," he commented, reaching for the doorknob without checking who was there. Katherine felt a sudden prickle of warning. Wait, her warning came too late. The door burst open, slamming into Williams and sending him staggering backward. Jasper Blackwood stood in the doorway, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with rage and desperation. "Hello, Katherine," he said, a gun pointed at the fallen deputy. "It's time to go home." Katherine stood slowly, her hand moving imperceptibly toward the pocket where she kept her revolver. "It's over, Jasper. There's nowhere for you to go. The marshals know everything." Jasper's smile was terrible to behold, the smile of a man with nothing left to lose. "Then we have nothing to discuss. You're coming with me, or I kill this boy and anyone else who gets in my way." Deputy Williams was conscious but dazed, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where the door had struck him. Katherine calculated her chances of reaching her gun before Jasper could fire. They weren't good. "Think, Jasper," she said, taking a small step forward. "You're surrounded by federal marshals. Even if you get me out of this room, how far do you think we'll get?" "Far enough," he snarled. "I have a boat waiting. We'll be in Mexico before they even realize you're gone." Another step. "And then what? Spend the rest of your life running? That's not the future you planned." "The future I planned was destroyed when you ran away." Jasper's control was slipping, his gun hand trembling slightly with emotion. "Everything I built was for us, Katherine, for our legacy." "No," Katherine contradicted calmly, taking another step. "It was for you, always for you. I was just another possession, like the ranch, like the cattle." She was within arm's reach of him now. Deputy Williams was slowly regaining his senses, his hand inching toward his fallen weapon. Katherine needed to keep Jasper's attention focused on her. "You never loved me, Jasper. You don't know how to love anyone but yourself." Jasper's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful," Katherine moved before he could finish, driving her elbow up just as Heath had taught her, striking Jasper's gun arm with all her strength. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as they grappled. Jasper was stronger, but Katherine fought with the ferocity of a woman who had decided never to be controlled again. She clawed, kicked, and struck, keeping him off balance as Deputy Williams scrambled for his gun. "Drop it, Blackwood," Williams shouted, weapon now trained on Jasper. Jasper froze, his own gun still clutched in his hand but pointed away from Katherine. For one eternal moment, the tableau held Katherine breathing hard, Williams steady despite his injury, Jasper caught between them. Then Jasper smiled that terrible smile again and began to raise his gun toward Katherine. Two shots rang out simultaneously, one from Williams' gun, the other from the doorway where Heath stood, his own weapon smoking. Jasper crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across his chest from two wounds. His eyes found Katherine's one last time, filled not with pain or fear but with genuine bewilderment, as if he could not comprehend, even at the end, that she had truly escaped him. Katherine. Heath was at her side instantly, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak as the reality of what had just happened washed over her. Jasper Blackwood was dead. The man who had haunted her nightmares, who had controlled her life, who had convinced her escape, was impossible gone. Marshal Walsh arrived moments later, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. "Williams, get that wound seen to," he ordered, then turned to Katherine and Heath. "I need statements from both of you, but they can wait an hour. Go get some air." Heath led Katherine from the room, past the gathering crowd of hotel staff and guests, out into the bright Texas sunshine. They walked in silence to a small park across from the hotel, finding a secluded bench beneath a live oak tree. "It's over," Heath said finally. "Really over." Katherine nodded, the shock beginning to fade, replaced by a profound sense of relief. "I never truly believed it would end, that I would be free of him." "Everyone told you you'd never escape him," Heath said, taking her hand in his. "I'm glad we proved them wrong." Katherine turned to face him, really looking at this man who had changed her life so completely in such a short time. The cowboy who had offered shelter to a desperate stranger, who had fought beside her, who had shown her what respect and genuine caring looked like. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Heath brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "That's entirely up to you, Katherine Collins. The world is wide open. And if I choose to stay in Texas, to build something new here." The hope that dawned in Heath's eyes was like the sunrise, gradual but unstoppable, illuminating his entire face. "Then I'd be the happiest man in the state, if you'll have me beside you." Katherine leaned forward, closing the distance between them. "I think we've proven we make a good team, Mr. Lawson." Their kiss was a promise, sealed in the dappled sunlight of an Austin park, with the future stretching before them, uncertain but free, challenging but theirs to shape together. 1 month later, Katherine stood on the porch of a small ranch house overlooking the Pedernales River. The property wasn't large, just 100 acres with good water and decent grazing, but it was theirs, purchased with her inheritance, once her father's estate was finally settled. Heath appeared from the barn, leading a paint mare he'd been training. At the sight of Katherine, his face broke into the smile that still made her heart race. "Thinking deep thoughts, Mrs. Lawson," he called. The name was still new. Their marriage just 2 weeks old, a quiet ceremony attended by their friends from the Santiago trading post, Marshal Walsh, and a recovering Deputy Cooper. "Just appreciating the view," she replied as he climbed the steps to join her. Heath slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Not bad for a beginning." Katherine leaned into him, savoring the sense of peace that had finally become familiar. "A year ago, I couldn't imagine being free, let alone happy. Everyone told me I'd never escape him." "Everyone was wrong," Heath said simply. Thanks to a certain cowboy, Katherine added, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Their kiss deepened as the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson. When they finally broke apart, Heath rested his forehead against hers. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small harmonica, newer and shinier than his old one. "Thought you might want to learn that song, the one my mother taught me about home." Katherine took the instrument, turning it over in her hands with a smile. "I'd like that, though I already know what home feels like now." As twilight gathered around their small ranch, Heath began teaching her the simple melody notes of hope and freedom floating out across the Texas plains, where once they had run for their lives. Now they ran only to meet each other, at the end of each day, in the home they had built together. The woman who had been told she'd never escape was not only free, she had found a love and a life beyond anything she had dared to dream. And the cowboy who had helped her prove everyone wrong had found his own redemption in the process, healing old wounds as they forged a new beginning. 3 years later, the Lawson Ranch had grown both in size and in occupants. A small boy with Heath's gray eyes and Katherine's determined chin chased a puppy across the yard while Katherine watched from the porch, one hand resting on her swelling belly where their second child grew. Heath rode in from checking the herd, dismounting with the easy grace that still captivated her. Their son, Edward, named for Katherine's father, ran to meet him, being swept up into strong arms with squeals of delight. "How are my favorite people today?" Heath asked, carrying Edward to the porch where he greeted Katherine with a kiss. "Growing," Katherine replied with a smile, placing his hand on her stomach where the baby kicked vigorously. "This one's going to be a handful." "Just like his mama," Heath teased, "or her papa," Katherine countered. They had agreed not to guess the gender, happy to be surprised when the time came. As they went inside for supper, Katherine paused in the doorway, looking back at the land that had become their home, at the life they had built from danger and desperation. She had been told she'd never escape, that no one left Jasper Blackwood unless he allowed it. Everyone had been wrong. With courage, determination, and the love of a good man, she had proven that no prison, physical or emotional, was truly escape-proof. The woman who had once been a possession was now fully her own person, married not out of duty or arrangement, but out of love and respect. The freedom she had risked everything for had become the foundation for a happiness deeper than she had known was possible. As she closed the door behind her, joining her family at the table, Katherine sent a silent thanks to that desperate young woman who had ridden into a stranger's camp on a dark night, and to the cowboy who had proven that sometimes, against all odds, escape was possible, and what waited on the other side was worth every risk.